Hi, this is Outlaw Bookseller. It's time for a literature video, I feel, because there's been lots of rock and roll recently. And this is a little clip about one of the great outsider figures of British literature. So why can't you see me? Well, I thought I'd just show you the view from my window because it's so lovely today. So without further ado, we'll move on and we'll talk about the Scots writer Alexander Trocchi. So, Scotland. What is it about Scottish writers? I mean, they're just so good. Every time I read a novel by a Scots writer, I'm always impressed, and they seem to be able to write in any genre, in any form. Is it something in the water? I find myself saying this in work all the time, and I don't think I've ever read a bad Scottish novel. You know, it's just one of those things. And I suppose the first Scots novels I read were things by Sir Walter Scott. Is he actually Scottish? I don't know. It's a long time ago. I was a child. But probably the first thing I read when I was a little bit more mature was The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, who of course is a Scot, is a fantastic novel, you know, and a rather underrated one in my opinion, despite its fame. And I'm sort of very pleased these days to say that kids have to read it in school. I wish I had to read something that exciting in school. Bear with me while I have a Coke. But yeah, Scotland, there's something in the water there. But today I want to talk about a great Scots novelist, but to me, he's probably my favourite Scots writer, which is a big call because, I mean, you look at the talent there. Alistair Gray, wonderful novelist and illustrator. 1982 Janine's one of my favourite novels. Alan Warner, who's still writing, fantastic writer. You know, Morven Callow, when I read that, it reminded me of Camus. It's fantastic stuff. And there's a new one out at the moment, which I want to get in paperback next year. Muriel Spark, fascinating writer, all sorts of things. Memento Mori is a favourite of mine. And, you know, contemporary crime fiction, there's Liam McIlvaney. His novel, The Quaker, is a really good sort of police procedural with unusual aspects, 60s set book, which I read a couple of years ago. Charles Stross's Accelerando, brilliant science fiction novel, which meshes the sort of, how can I put it, this sort of family saga with the post-human sort of approach. Amazing. Irving Welsh, you know, another Scots contemporary great. So why are they so good? But anyway, I like to go back to Alexander Trocchi, who is a figure who I sell very few books by. This is his most famous novel, Cain's book. And this is a Grove Press edition I bought back in 1992. And I can't remember how I discovered him, but he was one of the people you obviously read if you were interested in sort of Beat Generation, outside literature, what have you. And now he seems completely forgotten, and maybe he sells in Scotland, but certainly at work in the bookshops of Bath, I've hardly ever sold any of his books. And I've actually never met anybody who's read him. I just get the feeling that it's people my age and older, the only people who've read him. And he deserves to be rediscovered because he's brilliant. So just to talk about him, he was born in 1925, and his mother was Scots and his father was Italian, hence the surname Trocchi. And he sort of got a degree, did that sort of thing. Spent some time in Paris in the 50s, where he ran a literary journal called Merlin. He was involved with the Situationist International. And he wrote this wonderful piece called The Invisible Insurrection of a Million Minds, which is just fantastic. And while he was there in Paris, he unfortunately got addicted to heroin, which dominated his life, sadly. And you know, and he did no major work after about 1960. And while he was in Paris, he wrote some books for Maurice Herodias at the Olympia Press. You know, and he wrote some pornographic novels for him. The two I've read are probably the most famous ones: Helen and Desire, and White Thighs, I think is the other one. And they're strange mixtures of S&M and Glasgow's razor gangs. They're odd books, you know. I don't have them anymore, but they do come and go. But his sort of major work really boils down to two novels. And the one which is possibly more familiar these days due to a film version of probably about 10 years ago is Young Adam from 1954. And I've had several copies of this. This is the most recent Calder issue, because I'm very passionate about John Calder, and the imprint has now been taken on by other people because he's no longer with us. And this is a great book, and it's partially based on his experience of, he sort of drove a barge, I think, in the Hudson River in New York, and it's about that, and it's got sort of a murder plot. There was not a crime novel as such, and there's some erotic bits which were put in for the Olympia Press edition. Very spare, existential, dry, astringent prose, and really sort of pared down. Wonderful, straightforward writing. So if you like sort of things like Junkie by William Burroughs and the novels of Charles Bukowski, but the writing is deceptively simple, you love this. It's just fantastic stuff. It's very evocative as well, and just really great. And it's brief, economical. It has all the virtues of really good, simple writing, and yet it has real depth as well, which is what I really look for. And as I say, he'd done most of his work by 1960. He sort of spent some time in California, talking with the beat people there. And, you know, he was a real rebel and outsider, and he was a bad guy, you know, a lot of the time. And, you know, the way he treated his wife, particularly, there's these legendary stories about him sending her out to prostitute herself to get him money for heroin and stuff. And, you know, there's these terrible stories about how he treated people. And, you know, he did nevertheless produce a second great novel, Cain's book, as I say, and I've got the Calder edition here, which is a very bold autobiographical account of his heroin addiction while he was on a scow in New York. And for me, after Junkie, this is the great book about drug addiction. And, you know, it's obviously an influence over Irving Welsh's Trainspotting and what have you. And yet it's very little read, and it deserves to be, because it's pitiless and sparse and absolutely fabulous writing. You know, it's very confessional. There's no sort of bones about it. Really, really good. So I really recommend that. He used to sort of take advances from publishers of books which are then never written and spend them on drugs, you know, and stuff and that. So he wasn't always a pleasant character, but what, you know, addiction's an illness. So when somebody's in the grip of it, it is difficult. But he doesn't have a great reputation as a human being these days. But he is a wonderful, wonderful writer. So I would say do seek him out if you like outsider literature. And I'm doing this purely to publicise his work, because I really feel more people should read it. I don't want to tell you too much about it. A great book to get hold of if you can. It's published by Rebel Ink, Scottish publisher. I'm not sure if it's still in print. Hopefully it'll get reissued. I've had this some years. This is A Life in Pieces, Reflections on Alexander Trocchi by Alan Campbell and Tim Neal. This is wonderful. This is a compilation of writings by and about the man, and it's got lots of photographs and things as well. And it's a very interesting sort of looking chap, you know, very sort of bones in his face, quite attractive and yet craggy and strange. And he sort of upset people at the Edinburgh Literary Festival. And, you know, he really is the sort of writer that we don't have anymore. You know, probably the sort of British underground's lost figure, and somebody who, you know, with young people still reading, people like sort of Burroughs and Keruoac and Bukowski, you know, and this is him late in life. You know, Trocchi is kind of a must read, so I really would recommend you pick up his work. And as a Scots novelist, he's really important because it shows that we did have our own homegrown Burroughs there, and it's just great stuff, and huge influence over sort of later modern Scots writing and contemporary Scots writing. I'm going to mention this again. This is a book I mentioned in a video some time ago, which is The Garden of Eros by John Calder, which again I can't say enough good of. Calder published Trocchi in the UK, as I said. And if you want to learn about the great underground literary scene of the 40s, 50s, 60s, and how Calder published people like Burroughs, Beckett, Trocchi, what have you, this is marvellous. You know, this really is a primer. You really need this as background information if you want to understand what it was like in those days with the first B format paperbacks and how presses like Grove and Dial in America worked. It's absolutely fascinating if you love reading, writing and publishing, and it gives you great context, so do pick that up as well. So I would say, if you're a Scot, or even if you're not, get out there and pick up Cain's book. I feel it's his best work. Young Adam is fantastic as well. And, you know, look into him. There's lots of stuff about him on the web. He's a really interesting figure. So he is one of my favourite and one of the most neglected outsider writers. So, you know, it would be great to see more people picking him up. So that's Alexander Trocchi, brief introduction. This is Outlaw Bookseller, signing out for now. There's more literature to come soon.